David Horner, welcome to ASPI.
Thank you.
How do the lessons of ASIO's foundation apply today to the job that ASIO faces in the age of terrorism?
Well, what I tried to do with the book is set out what ASIO was doing in the 1950s, and many of the principles and the ideas that they were applying back there in the 1950s still continue to be applied to ASIO through to today. The one to do with terrorism, though, is a little different, because there was no actual terrorism taking place in Australia during the 1950s. Nothing like the Bali bombing, for example. And so ASIO, over its history, has had to take on this additional task. And for a while, ASIO wasn't sure whether it was their task or whose task it was. And if we have a bombing in Australia like the Hilton bombing, it's the job of the police to try to catch the people who did it. ASIO's job is to try to detect the sort of people in the community who are likely to do it. And that is the same sort of techniques used there as we use for trying to deal with the communists. That is, have agents in place, tap phones and so on. So the techniques are very much the same. The target is different, but the need to do it is just the same.
Is that going to be always one of the eternal tensions, if you like, that line between the spook catchers and the cops? Is that one of the tensions that is always going to be developed?
There has always been a tension between that, and there are many people out there in the community, not so much now but in the past, used to talk about ASIO as the secret police. Well, they're not the police, because back then they had no power of arrest. That's for the police to do. It was ASIO's job to collect the information. The job was to collect the information and to give it to the government, other government departments. And a lot of people sort of don't get their mind around that.
Now, the Edward Snowden effect, or the Julian Assange effect, how is that going to affect the way that security organisations operate?
One of the interesting things is we're now in a society in which there's much more transparency than there ever was. Many more records are available, records are made available through Archives Act and so on. You would say, well, we're into this society now where much more information is available. In some respects it's true, but the effect of Snowden and Assange has been that the governments now are much more reluctant to release information and to put in place arrangements to make sure that information is not released. And I have personally found that in the peacekeeping official history that I'm also doing, it's taken much longer to get volumes cleared over the last couple of years than it was several years ago. And it's been told to me, and that seems a bit odd, we can't release them because of WikiLeaks and Snowden. Of course, it's got absolutely nothing to do with the document that I'm trying to get released, but it's a mindset that is now appearing not just in government ministers, but in the government departments. And so, yes, there's much less information.
So has Snowden had the strange effect of making governments even more paranoid and more defensive about information?
Oh, I think that's the case. Julian Assange might say that he was in the business of getting information released. The net result has been much less has been released as a result now of what he has initiated.
And what's the downside of that? What's the malign effect of that sort of mindset?
Well, what that means is there's less information available to the community, and the community, in many cases, has a right to know what the government is doing on a whole range of issues, and it's wrong. It's against our democracy that a lot of information is now not released that previously should have been released, and that's what has been one of the unfortunate effects of Snowden and Assange.
Australia's just had a pretty heated debate about the new legislation on ASIO's powers and ASIO's rights to protect its secrets. What does ASIO's history tell you about the sort of debate that Australia's just had about ASIO's rights?
Well, there's some curious things about the ASIO history of the 1950s that might catch people a little bit unawares. ASIO was set up in 1949 on a charter. Bit of paper written by the Prime Minister, told the head of ASIO what to do. The Director General of ASIO, Charles Price, said, well, that's not good enough. We need to have an Act of Parliament that sets out what ASIO can do. And so we had the Act of Parliament in 1956, the ASIO Act, that set out exactly what ASIO can and can't do. And that was really a step forward when you consider that MI5, on which ASIO was based, itself didn't have an act. And then Charles Spry said, well, look, I've been tapping phones at the say-so of the Prime Minister. We ought to have an Act of Parliament that sets out how we can tap phones and how we can't tap phones. And so in 1960 we had an Act of Parliament that set out that ASIO can only tap phones if there's a warrant signed by the Attorney General. It can only last for a certain period. The Attorney General has to then renew it. And at that time we had the Attorney General sometimes even calling in the tapes and listening to the transcript, listening to the tapes and looking at the transcript to make sure that the transcripts were right and that the sort of information that was being collected was the right information that ASIO should be collecting. Lots of myths out there about ASIO tapping phones left, right and centre. So what we've got is gradual, and we also had the Crimes Act in 1960 to define what espionage is and so on. So it's, from my history, we see a gradual attempt by ASIO to have its rules actually set down. Then we've seen over subsequent years more acts of Parliament, and on top of that, control mechanisms being introduced, Inspector General and so on, to give the public some confidence that what ASIO is doing is being checked up on by some outside body. So we see that all beginning back in the old ASIO history.
How much has ASIO moved from that opening era when sound chaps could be relied on to do sound things?
That was right. The old early recruiting of people was that you knew somebody who was a good fellow, and he would be recruited. It's much more professional now, and it has been for many years. People need to be vetted. They need to have psychological profiles done on them to make sure that they are people who are going to be reliable, and that has meant that people who have been joining ASIO for the last 20 or 30 years on the merits of of what they bring to the job, their education, their particular skills, and not just because their father happened to be in the organisation or they knew somebody who knew somebody, and that's made a much more professional organisation, and it means that the people are more diverse. They have different views rather than from some particular group in the community.
How well do you think Australia has tackled what the writer Frank Morehouse calls the dark conundrum? The conundrum that to protect itself, a society has to actually have an institution or an intelligence organisation with some of the powers to actually limit the freedoms that society is trying to protect.
This is a conundrum that's never going to be resolved satisfactorily in many people's minds. How to have an organisation that operates secretly. It's all very well to have these control mechanisms, but ultimately a lot of things they have to do can be done secretly, and that is always going to be a matter that's in the minds of the community. Are things happening here that we don't know about and which we would be very unhappy with? And one of the issues that comes up, and that is the secrecy. Why should ASIO's operations be secret? Why should their people be secret? Well, it's pretty obvious. If you're going to have somebody who's going to sidle up to, say, somebody in a perhaps a terrorist organisation and persuade one of them to pass information to ASIO, obviously you can't have their names out there. So there's always going to be that element of secrecy, and when you've got secrecy, you've got people who are suspicious about what the organisation might or might not be doing. So this is a real problem in a democratic society, but democratic societies around the world have all recognised that you need to have an organisation like ASIO for national security purposes, and most people in Australia accept that. The argument is about how much secrecy, how much can be released, how much power.
And how well do you think Australia has hit that balance?
It goes up and down according to, if you like, what the threat is. And where you've got a very real terrorist threat, as evidenced by people being killed in places like Bali, then ASIO and other security organisations say, well, you need more power to deal with that. When you need more power, then you've got people suspicious about the power that an organisation might have. So it goes up and down really according to the level of threat.
And this, of course, is the point that Frank Morehouse makes, that ASIO's greatest power, in a sense, is the power to define a threat, to say that or you, that's a threat.
Well, that of course has always been the case, and which is going back to the early ASIO history. Is that particular communist a threat, or is that person who's friendly with that communist a threat? And that always has with it the risk that ASIO is taking, making a judgment where, just like the military in a way, they take the worst case, and they would say because they're protecting Australia, they have to take the worst case. You can't assume the best.
To go back to the counter-espionage element of the ASIO identity, ASIO starts off fighting communism, looking at the Australian society and thinking about communist sympathisers in Australia. If ASIO today looks at, say, the rising superpower in Asia, China, and looks at an Australian community with a very large Chinese society, a lot of Chinese Australians, what lessons should ASIO take from its foundation experience in applying those counter-espionage operations to Australia today?
We need to remember, and you've mentioned it, ASIO was set up to do counter-espionage, and that has always remained. And people sometimes forget while you're chasing terrorists that continues to be ASIO's principal job, to protect Australian secrets. And the problem with espionage is that it's very hard to catch somebody doing it. And if somebody robs a bank and you look in there and the money's gone, somebody's pinched some records, if they've been put back again, you don't know they've gone, but if the person just remembers what's in there, there's no way of checking on that. And so counter-espionage often results in nobody being arrested. Foreigners get thrown out, they get thrown out quietly. But ASIO's job in counter-espionage is always also to put in place arrangements whereby it's difficult for a potential enemy to gain secrets. Rules and regulations, people being vetted, and so on. And then we have an overlay of another issue that has become more important in recent times, and it's not just the spy walking out of a building either with the document up his jumper or remembered, but it's the electronic espionage. That is the cracking our electronic communications and so on. There's a whole range of that. And of course that has become really important, perhaps the main focus of our counter-espionage effort over the last 10 or so years, and getting more difficult. There's no guarantee that just because the Cold War is over, that there are not countries out there willing to do us harm or willing to get our secrets, not just commercially, but our military secrets of our alliance. So that counter-espionage part of ASIO remains a very important part of what they're doing.
And any Asian government today looking at Australia would see, in a sense, the same thing that the Soviet Union saw all those years ago, see an Australia that has an extremely close relationship with the United States.
Yes, people have said, well, Australia is not a really big country in the world, why should we be worried about espionage? But we know that the Soviets back in the 1950s said, well, Australia's a good target because you've got big country, the United States, Britain, all their security apparatus protecting their organisations, but they share the information with Australia.
So Australia's still a good target?
So Australia then becomes a good target. And perhaps Australia is not as clued up as the Americans and the British in protecting their secrets. So we'll be a soft target. So and that of course continues. We are still part of the Western Alliance. We're still sharing information with the British and the Americans, and therefore that information would be valuable to a potential enemy.
David Horner, thank you.